welcome to this week's video. For this week, I will be doing my best and worst books of 2022. Now I'm looking at my Goodreads, and for my best, I will be primarily talking about the ones that I've given 5 stars to. Otherwise, like if I include like the 4 stars and stuff, this will be like a 2-hour long video. And the worst, I think we will maybe stick to the 1 stars. Yeah. So we will start with, and some of them I have, some of them I read in ebook or audiobook, so I'll just like put the picture up for it. Probably for the worst ones, I don't have them anymore, so I will be putting pictures for those up as well. So let's get started we'll be going from January of 2022 onward. We started with Flawless by Jan Moran, and I gave that book 5 stars. And I still vaguely sort of remember it. It was having to do with a perfume company, and the hero was a chef, and she was like a skincare company that she was taking over from her, I think, aunt. And there was like, it was like really I loved it very, very much. And it was just there was like people like working close to her that were actually like betraying her, like her fiance, and then like the real hero is like the chef guy who was just so, like, he wasn't like overbearing or anything. He just sort of let her come to, like, he wanted to help her, and he like did help her in some ways, but in other ways he sort of backed off and like let her take control of things, and let her like make her decisions and that kind of stuff. Loved it so much. 5 stars. If I should get a paperback copy of that, if there is one available to put on my keeper shelf, because I really like that. The next one was also in January, and I do have a copy of it, and it's His Captive Lady by Anne Gracie, who has become a favorite historical romance author. I love her so much, and this was she had been I believe raped by her uncle, and there was a baby, and her father she forgave him like more than I would have, but the father gave the baby away, or I think like wanted to like leave the baby to die somewhere, or like he was gonna give it away, but then like the father died, and so like Nell like lost her house, and she was like destitute. But she was always like looking for her baby, and Harry came along and like bought the house, but unknowing that it was Nell's house, and it was just so emotional, so beautiful. I loved this book. I just needed the blurb to sort of like jolt my memory of like what actually happened in this book. 5 stars, definitely, undoubted. Next we have The Heir by Sophie Lark. Is the first book in her Kingmakers series. And I know for a lot of people, this is not her favorite of their favorite of the Kingmakers series. Their favorite is actually The Bully, who was Dean, who was a piece of shit in The Heir, and I'm sorry, what he does, I am really not interested in him getting a happily ever after, but I'm willing to read the book. I loved The Heir, and it is somebody described it as a mafia Hogwarts, where children of mafia families after high school go to this special school that is on a secluded island somewhere to learn how to mafia. And we have Leo and Anna, I think her name was, and they grew up in that life, and they're both students there, and they've been best friends all their lives, and now the happy pants are kicking in. So things are starting to change between Leo and Anna, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And I'm interested in reading more of the series. You're gonna have to convince me that Dean is a hero. I'm gonna read The Bully, and I understand Dean had a hard life. Boo-hoo frickin' princess, as Bobby from Supernatural would say. I'm sure all these kids, they're in the mafia. They're not having the best life. Okay? Now, granted, Leo and Anna do seem to have both be, loved by their parents and that, so they have that, but for the most part, I don't know, you're gonna have to convince me that Dean is worthy of a happy ever after. Because reading The Heir and what he does, I don't give a shit about his unhappy childhood for what he tried to do to Leo. I really don't give a shit. But I'm willing to go. I'm willing to read his book. We shall see. But definitely 5 stars for The Heir. Next we have Scandalous Summer Nights by Anne Barton. And I have that one here on my keeper shelf. And that's that one there. She's always been in love with him, and he's her brother's best friend. And she follows him to somewhere. Yeah, she knows that he is about to set sail for Egypt to go on like an expedition, because he's I think he's like an archaeologist or something. He's gonna explore something. And so she goes after him, and they end up in a compromising position, and he fights his feelings because he's his best friend, she's his best friend's sister, and that whole thing. But I just, yeah, I loved this book so very much. Historical romances were good to me this year. They really, really were. Which brings me to my next 5-star. And this is Julia Quinn's First Comes Scandal. This book was delightful. And this is Nicholas and Georgiana Bridgerton, who I believe is Papa Bridgerton's sister. So Edmund, I believe his name is Edmund, his sister. Edmund, who, dies by getting stung by a bee. Edmund Violet's husband. So Georgiana is his sister. Yeah, and she unfortunately gets in a compromising position with this dude who is not the hero, and she doesn't want to marry him because she does not love him. So Edmund's, I think, brother, I believe, comes and or somebody in Edmund's circle, they bring their son Nicholas to town to marry Georgiana and save her from scandal. But she doesn't want to marry him either. But she doesn't want to marry him either less than she doesn't want to marry the original dude who tried to compromise her. So I loved this book. There was no, like, it was just easygoing. There was the typical, like, Julia Quinn sort of banter, but it wasn't sort of like the friction kind of banter. Like, it wasn't that, like, they hated each other and then it isn't like an enemies to lovers. It's sort of a friends to lovers, I guess, because they start off as friends even though they're sort of like forced to get married. But and it's like once they're sort of married, then they like fall in love with each other and like that kind of stuff. And but they start to fall in love like a little bit before too. But this was just delightful and like easygoing, and just like there wasn't any like real sort of conflict in this book. So if you like your books with like a lot of angst and stuff, that's not what this is. This is like the lowest angst romance I think I've ever read. And it was just perfect for what I needed, like at the time. Absolutely loved it. Cannot recommend enough if you're looking for something that just warms your heart and is will just make you happy and like put you in a good mood. Let's see what else I have here. Do I have any more 5 stars on here? We have, speaking of books that put you in a good mood and are just everything that you need for the show that was 2022, that just helped cap it off and put you in just a wonderful mental mind space. I adored this book. I would say this was the number 1 best book that I read in 2022. This book just made me happy. And I would add sort of the sequel, Anne of Avonlea, because I sort of finished, I finished this one sort of before the new year, like right before. So I will include it as well. Anne of Green Gables, if you do not know, by Lucy Maud Montgomery, is the story of Anne Shirley, an orphan girl who comes by mistake to live with a brother and sister who sent for a boy to help run their farm. And instead they get Anne. And they initially are like, what are we going to do with a girl? A girl can't help us run this farm, and blah, blah, blah. But the elderly brother, Matthew, takes such a liking to Anne and just her way of like seeing the world and her like delightful air about her and her manner and just her imagination, and just captures his heart completely. And he convinces the sister Marilla to keep her, and they end up just hiring a boy to like somebody to help like work the farm. And it's sort of her finding this home and this loving family that she never had. So she comes to them at the age of, I think, 11, and goes to school and meets some people and meets Gilbert Blythe, a boy in her school who takes an instant liking to her and instantly becomes a smitten love puppy for her. But he makes the mistake of, in trying to get her attention, because he is a stupid 14 or 13-year-old boy, he thinks that by teasing a girl is showing them how much you like them. And she is very, very sensitive about her red hair. And he like grabs one of her braids and calls it a carrot and basically nicknames her Carrots. And she is horrified and angry about this and breaks a slate over his head. And thus begins their love story. No, she declares that he is now her mortal enemy. So Gilbert is instantly the smitten love puppy, and not so much. It takes Anne some time. Through Anne of Avonlea as well. She's still fighting it, but she's feeling the disturbance in the force a little stronger in this one. I would definitely classify their romance as a slow burn, most definitely. But Lucy Maud Montgomery's writing style, I cannot praise enough how beautiful her writing style is, how immersive, how she draws you in and just puts your mind in this peaceful, wonderful place. My only regret about starting these books now is that I would have loved if during the summer when I went on my walks and I would sit in the park and read a little bit, if I had these books at that time, they would have been perfect to sort of just sit in the park surrounded by like trees and your flowers and just read these books. I now want to inhale everything that Lucy Maud Montgomery has ever written. Cannot recommend enough and yes, they are technically like middle grade. This one's definitely middle grade. Anne of Avonlea, she's I think like is like 16 to 18, so it's a little bit older, and you just follow her like sort of into adulthood. But as an adult, I cannot recommend these books enough. So those were the best books. Now we will talk about the not so best, which I will stick primarily to the 1-star books that we have, and I don't have it here because it was an ebook technically. The Summer of the Spanish Woman by Katherine Gaskin, which made me sad because I loved the paperback book that I had of hers years and years ago. I want to find it again because I want to put it on my keeper shelf or like reread it and see if it still holds up. The Ambassador's Women by Katherine Gaskin. Absolutely loved it. So I wanted to try another by her, The Summer of the Spanish Woman. Nope. Did not work for me. They're living on this ranch, the heroine and her family, and then like her father dies, and so they lose the ranch to this guy who just sort of, it was like insta love sort of to the extreme. I mean, she's out like riding a horse one day, and then like he comes and he sees her and instantly falls in love with her, and before they even say like a word to each other, he's kissing her and like professing his like undying love to her, and like they hadn't even had a conversation, and then whoopsie daisy, turns out he's the one who's buying, his family is the one that is buying her ranch, and so she has to go get sent to somewhere else with her family, another house that like her father had or something, but there are other people living there, and sort of they think of the heroine and her family as like sort of guests, even though the heroine and her family are like, no, this is our house, we are going to take it over, you can stay for now. But the people there are like, no, you can stay for now, you are our guests. And it's sort of like that back and forth, and she like ends up with the son of one of the like one of the sons, and she like lets him like take her out and like lets him like kiss her, and is sort of just like, oh well, like I guess it was inevitable that like you and I were like gonna become a thing. And I'm like, really? What about your undying love for what's his face who took your ranch? Like, and I just like DNF'd it because like it was just sort of things were happening that just did not make sense in my opinion. So that one sort of sadly did not work for me. Let's see if we have. Ooh, nope. The only other 1 star we have a couple of 2 stars that like that they didn't work for me or whatever. But this one caused the rage, and I know that there are people that have loved this book, and I'm great for you. Glad for you if you love this book. I don't care. I don't care if you love this book. I don't need to hear you come and tell me that you love this book and that like you had issue with my review of it. I don't care. You good. You keep that for you. If you love this book, great. Keep that for you. The book that I am talking about, I actually have a separate rant review of this book on this channel, and it is Destiny by Sally Bowman. I hated this book. I hated this book because I loved the first half of this book. And then it all went to shit. We have Helene and Edouard, and Helene is like living in a trailer park with her mother, and she's very, very poor. And her mother's got like this little side thing going on with like this major who is like helping her with like money and like all this stuff for certain services rendered. And then the major like looks at Helene and starts fooling around with her. And then there's this boy, Billy, I believe his name was Billy, who is in love with Helene, but he witnesses some things and that the major is involved in, and they end up killing him, and Helene vows revenge, but that revenge never happened. I know I skimmed the book, but I was skimming specifically for any mention of Major Calvert, because that was the only thing I cared about in the second half of the book at that point. After Helene then falls in love with this, leaves the town that she's from and falls in love with this older man, Edouard, who, unbeknownst to her and him at the time, is the brother of Helene's real father. So he's her uncle. And now, granted, they don't know it at the time, but Helene leaves him for, I don't remember the reason right now, but she leaves him and then goes off to become an actress. And there's this whole like spiel, there's this whole like long spiel of her with these two like movie, somehow involved in the movie business dudes that I did not give two craps about. And it was just her sort of like rising sort of like as an actress, but being so sad and like such a sad actress lady with this like dark past. And then she and Edouard get back together, but he finds out that she is his niece after they've already had children, and the children are fine. And he decides that he's going to keep this from her, which I was fine with, but he can't risk having more children with her. So instead of telling her the truth, and I'm going to spoil it now because this kills himself, runs into a tree, kills himself. And I was waiting throughout like this whole like other half of the book for Major Calvert to get what's coming to him, for Helene to get her revenge, for Billy, or was it Billy or Bobby? I think it was Billy, for his death, I was skimming through looking for any mention of Major Calvert. I didn't see any. So, like, I think there might have been a mention of Edward. Like, did he go to, like, her small town? And he was, like, talking to someone? Talking to, like, these two women? But that was about it that I saw. That I read. Hated that book. Which made me sad, because it was a reread for me. Because I thought that I remembered loving this book when I was younger. But I must have only read the first half. Because the second half of this book was an absolute shit show. And just, yeah, so that is the worst book that I read in 2022. Those were the two. But the Spanish, some of the Spanish Woman, 1 star, just because it turned a corner and just like went like nonsensical, and I just DNF'd it. Destiny I finished. And yeah, so that was my wrap up of the best and worst books that I read in 2022. I am looking forward to another great reading year for the most part. There were some duds, but there were some really, really wonderful books. And 2022 was the year that brought Anne Shirley into my life. And yeah, and I started reading more sort of like Anne Shirley. I consider that a classic. It was in 1905 that it was published. And I started dipping my toe into sort of like more classic books, mixing them in with my regular popular fiction, which I adore. So I'm looking forward to more of doing that this year. So yeah, let me know if you like read any of these books. If you loved either of the books that I mentioned that were my worst, that's wonderful. I'm happy for you. I did not. I don't need you to come and tell me that I am wrong for not liking them. You keep that for you. You keep that in a special place in your heart for you. I'm okay in my life without knowing that. But any of the books that I loved, if you want to let me know that you loved them as well. We want to keep this a positive place. I'm allowed to rant here. You're not allowed to disagree with me here. My channel, my rules. Follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/authorejamie. Like my Facebook page at facebook.com/authorejamie. And I will talk to you guys next time. Bye!